I had an incident occur last Saturday. Let me see what last Saturday was. It was October 12th. That's really when it all started. And I had been working since the beginning of October, straight days. I was going to come up on days off on the 14th and the 15th. We started up an old well that had been isolated for a frack. And it was going to generate 400 barrels of oil per day, which is a lot. And to go through old equipment, you would think that they would want to test all their parts. I knew I would bring it on slowly. In any case, when you sell oil, it has to be clear of water and other contaminants. They want a clean product when they sell it, and they have ways to test it, and they will reject it if it's not clean. We knew that we had to separate the water. It's called production water. It's really all this salt water with all these chemicals present from a frack. All kinds of sand comes up as well. You can't have that in your oil. But with these old wells, these separators don't work so well when you're pushing through something that's got 3,000 pounds at a well head. But you do have your flow lines that only can hold 100 pounds of pressure. And that's our job, is we have to things will shut down if you exceed that 100 pounds, maybe 110 pounds. I like to keep it 80, 90. And the guys that don't, we call it being a cowboy. They cowboy it. I have a superior that is really getting on my back. And what happened is that oil went to flare on that well at 10 o'clock that night, or between 10 and 10:30. On my phone, I see that my superior is calling, and I was dead tired, and I'm like, I'm going to bed. I thought he was calling about my paperwork. We do paperwork each night, and we send it out. 2 seconds later, maybe 30 seconds later, I live in corporate apartments. I share a wall with a guy that is a fellow, we're MSOs. He's a fellow MSO, that's supervisor. He's got his pack of 3 who do his bidding. I get a knock on my door. I look in my peephole, and it's, Kiara, you sent oil to flare on the Cleo. That's the name of this well. I know full well I didn't, because number one, I had my choke open only to a 6. You can go up to a 30. It was down to a 6, and there was only 60 pounds of pressure going through that flow line. And I had worked on that well most of the afternoon with a fellow MSO who helps me out immensely, who is an excellent mechanic, because I'm not, quite frankly, so I enlist help. He was standing there, this guy that lives next door, who literally could have leaned over to his wall, knocked on it, and have gotten me. But instead he walked the 20 paces to knock on my front door. He's standing there with another big, yeah, you sent, because first I did not understand what they were saying. You sent oil to flare. He's like, I'll go shut it in. I was not dressed. I was in my bedclothes. They were dressed. And, you know, the first thing is take care of that situation. Oil to flare means it could go out into the environment if it was spreading. Means that the flare is lit, but there's oil being shot through it. And while there's containment pits and all that sort of thing, you don't know. If this thing was going on for an hour or two, you could have a really bad mess out there in the environment. So I was like, would you? Yes, that'd be great. So he goes on his way. I pick up the phone. Is that why you called about the Cleo? He's like, yes. And I told him, Jane went out there and blah, blah, blah. And that was the end of that call. Well, come to find out, my friend did an investigation the next morning, what's called a white glove test. You go around to the fencing and everything, and you take white gloves or these absorb pads, which are white, and you see where oil is. Oil was nowhere except in the flare pit, which is contained by a dike of scoria, which tells you something with 3,000 pounds. If it's shot oil to flare, you would think since I live a half an hour away and everybody else does from that well, it would be at least an hour before it was shut in. How come there's no oil? So he said whoever did this was there when they did it, and then they shut it in, and they're trying to blame us. And that's what makes sense. And what makes sense also is does this little sideline business in the Bakken region where he is the supervisor. He has his boys chase production. Chasing production means they want to get their production numbers up, right? More oil, they look better. So what they probably did, and what had to have happened, is that they went there, didn't check what I had going on in what's called the treater, which is, it has to go through a couple of vessels in the treater to separate the water from the oil, and then that's one treater, and that's called the two-phase, and the three-phase separates the water, the oil, and the gas. I had arranged it so that both processes were in play, which would be too much if you crank this thing open. If you choke this, let this choke rip, like even in the teens, 12, 13, 14 choke, you would blast through those vessels. They're old, they couldn't contain it, and it would send oil to flare, and you'd be right there. It would happen, you'd shut it down. That's what made the most sense. And the fact that who lived 70 miles away from me knew in 2 seconds, and those guys knew. And this, actually, another factor is that this well could not be seen from the road. You had to be either in a helicopter or down at the location to even see this flare, that it was lit. And it was 10:30 at night, pitch black. You know, we're not talking city lights, we're out in the northern prairie. It is pitch black at night. So who saw it? Somebody who was there. Anyway, that was that story, and that happened on October 12th, and they tried to pin it on me. And when I heard the next morning from my partner friend that there was no spill anywhere, that it was contained right, and I took pictures, right in this dike, you know, just a radius around the flare, in a flare pit. So it wasn't even anything that was reportable. I called and left a message on his voicemail and said, I don't appreciate people coming out on my location, changing things, sending oil to flare, and then trying to pin it on me. And that's all I have to say about it. It's evident he didn't like that. So what's happened recently is that the superior above him, who used to be my direct superior, but it's growing so much, there's now more tiers, and he's been elevated and on a level below him. So I only deal with, whereas I used to deal, but he's now beyond my reach. I got a call last night about being unavailable by phone and how I have to leave my phone on at night, which is fine, and I didn't realize I needed to leave my phone on 24/7. No big deal. I told him I would do that. But what happened is that he was told they tried to reach me twice, and I was unreachable. Because what happened yesterday on Saturday, which would make it the 18th of October, I came out to my truck to a dead battery, only to see, after I made these phone calls to try to find somebody to jump me, that hair was on fire in voicemails and text messages, because at 6:30 a.m., and I was looking at this at 7 a.m., my 4-well pad, the Kirkland Morgan 4-well pad, had shut down at 6:30 a.m., a half an hour before, because of a high tank in the divert tank, which is an overflow tank. And this tank battery has 20 tanks on it. They're like 25 foot tall. His hair was on fire because this thing was down for a half an hour, and he got a hold of my relief guy. The other goon, just so happens all the goons are involved. My partner on my route, the guy who takes over for me when I have days off, is one of his goons, this 20-year-old kid he got a hold of him, who was in, so he was saving the day by bringing my well pad back on, and I couldn't be reached for that half an hour. Well, I texted him back and said, have a dead battery, and his text back, you need to call me now, and called him, got his voicemail, and just said, my battery is dead and I'm working on this. Anyway, my truck had been giving me problems, needing repairs in the past month and a half, and totaling $5,000 so far. So on top of working all these days, I'm also getting stuck on, 70 miles from where my wells are and having to be towed, and endless. It's just been compounded. I got stuck on roads 3 times where my truck just died and lost power, and it had to be towed back to, either I limped back or it had to be towed back to the Ford dealership, which is where I get it repaired, 70 miles away from where I live, because there's nothing out here. So, and that's in a place known as Dickinson, North Dakota, which is kind of the base of civilization here. My relief guy, one of his cronies, saves the day. Oh boy, my well pad is down for a half an hour. But in any case, in my conversation, we finally did talk in a little bit after that, he said, that's 2 times you've been unreachable. And I said, what's the first time? He said, well, with the Cleo. And I said, I was totally reachable. What are you talking about? And he is this Hispanic guy. Could have literally rapped on the wall that we share with our apartments and reached me, but instead he walked the 20 paces and knocked on my front door. That's all of 2 minutes. How is that unreachable? And he said, I left you 3 voicemail messages. I was floored. I'm still floored that somebody could just lie. I mean, all you do is got to get the Verizon records. That's just an intimidation tactic, because obviously there's nothing of anything real there, anything truthful there. I'm just always astounded when people can do that and they think that it actually helps them. So I was like, oh my God. I said, I can't believe you're saying this to me. And I got so pissed off. I just was like, well, I can't believe you're lying to me, and I can't talk to you. And I hung up on him. What was I to do? If somebody just lies to just in conversation to me and tells me something that's blatantly false, my reaction was, I'm done talking to you. So I hung up on him. There was that conversation. And then So called me last night, which I do appreciate, because he knows how to smooth things over. So he did say, called me and said that you were unavailable twice. So I explained the Cleo situation to him, and how on earth can not being reached for 2 minutes be unavailable. And then with the second situation with the Kirkland Morgan not being reached for a half an hour, and I had a dead truck battery. That my relief partner went out there and turned on the wells, so there wasn't even literally hardly any downtime. That same relief person, when he was on, just 2 days this month, he was on that same pad, the Kirkland Morgan, high tanked on water. We did have road closures because it's rained, and which means the water hauler trucks, these big semis, cannot come out. But what he didn't do was open up all the water tanks. So one tank was completely empty. It could have held, it's 25 feet tall. It could have held enough water for more than a day's worth of well pumping on 4 wells. He didn't do anything. That thing high tanked and closed in at 7 p.m. on the day that he had worked. The alarms come in on our phone. I have those records. Those records are permanent in the system about that thing high tanking. But that didn't matter, and I had to come on next day whenever I arrived there on my route, move the water, pressure down all the wells, get them back going again. He wasn't called out, and that was 7 p.m. That was not late. There was no call out for him. It's called a call out. Nothing. Why is it when mine is down for half an hour and I can't be reached, everybody's hair is on fire? Generally, it is not a big deal for a well to be down for 12 hours. They don't make a big deal out of it. There are wells down all over this place because it's just not easy to keep things running. There's a lot going on. There's so much going on. And it's a big company. They have a lot of scheduling they have to do, and they are not very good at it yet. It's not streamlined. It's not smooth sailing. You have rigs that are needing to move onto wells to do this, that, or the other thing. They're scheduled. Meanwhile, the wells are sitting dormant. They could be producing, but they're sitting there just because of a scheduling glitch, or they don't have a rig to put on it. All kinds of ways wells are down. There are people that don't hear for days from any superior. They go out, supervisor, they go out about their business. They have wells down. They have nothing going on that they're doing right. Didn't think. I didn't think this would be why I would be filming this. And I'm pretty good at soldiering on. I'm the only girl in the field. I've been out here for a year. July, August, September, October, a year and 3 months.